Hi again, everyone. That was just me rolling the dice, obviously, to see which way the housing market's going to go, and you saw the results. There's the numbers. Okay, but in all reality, let's look at what the 2022 Canadian housing market may or may not bring. And before I get into my opinion, I'm not a prediction guy anymore. I used to be, but I quit that. I'm an opinion based on facts and numbers, but I don't know what's going to happen this year with federal policies and especially obviously their monetary policies. So I'll give you a couple of opinions, but I'm not going to predict up or down either way. I will get into, first of all, other people's predictions and some of the major players. All right, so let's start with RE/MAX. RE/MAX has predicted the Canadian real estate prices to rise by 9.2% in 2022. And they have their reasoning in their article. You can Google that and find that out. I won't bore you with the details. Next up will be the Royal LePage. Royal LePage, 10.5%. I see a trend here. I don't know if these companies are trying to outdo each other, and I don't know how they come up with these numbers. They have their reasoning. Again, it's a lot to do with supply and demand, and how the market has been running up to this. The other one I want to look at is CMHC's housing forecast. This is CMHC's housing outlook from May 6th, 2021. They haven't given an updated Canada-wide one since then, so I just want to go with their most recent forecast. So the housing markets are expected to moderate and risks remain. So this was in late spring. During the summer, they did kind of fall off a bit, but prices didn't decline. But they did moderate, as they said. The fall was a different story. It increased again. Sales were dramatic, and prices were moving upwards. I want to go back to their previous forecast before then, and I think this was, let me just pull it up here. So this is a special edition one in 2020, and I think this was in April or May. Yeah, so May 27th, we have it there. The report provided a gloomy outlook on the Canadian economy. Significant declines in all housing indicators, severe loss in household income and employment. So it was a pretty bad outlook in 2020. Now, I would have said the same thing most likely at that point, so I don't blame them. But so that was the 2021. That was at the beginning of the pandemic, so I understand. I want to tackle one issue before I get into my opinions on the 2022 housing market and where it's going to go. And that was the supply and demand issue, because it's something that has to be addressed, because it's always talked about. Everyone likes to blame supply and demand, supply chain issues, whatever you call it. And I don't feel it's a problem, and I'm going to back it up with some numbers. And if anybody disagrees or if you have any comments on it, please let me know in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to respond or to read those. But again, this is based on my own research. Let's check this out. So here we have, and this is from, I forget what website it's from, but it's from Statistics Canada, the data. And you'll see it's single-family housing completions versus population growth by decade. So, okay, we go by decades. The blue is the completions, which they talk about housing starts and they talk about completions. Completions is the real inventory that has been completed. So we're gonna stick with that theme. And then population growth, and you can see it's remained very consistent up until the 2000s. Then we get into the 2010s and beyond, and it looks like the housing completions are way down, and they're down a little bit compared with the last years or the last decades, but population growth is way up. So we seem to have this big divide between housing, new homes being completed, or new single-family homes now. And that's another thing with this graph. They're not talking about multi-family units. They're not talking about units even, which it would encompass anything, apartment buildings and everything. They're talking about single family housing. So now single family housing, does that include condominiums, apartments? Obviously it doesn't include duplexes because that's multifamily. So anyway, this is not talking about all units completed. It's talking about a specific portion, and I don't know what data they use to collect this. But you can see there's a big divide. The population has shot up in comparison to the completions of single-family homes. Now I wanted to debunk this graph because, again, a lot of people pointing fingers at supply and demand. Let's build more homes, and we won't have this issue. And I disagree, and I'll show you why. This is an interesting graph, and I believe this is a good representation of today. You know, there used to be a lot more people living in per household, and of course now we have less people per household. And I have, again, more numbers to back that up. So, you know, look at back in say like the early 1900s, we had almost 10 people per household, and now it shows about 2.5, but it's 2.9 on the data I have, but 2.5 to 3 people per house. So that's also, but you can see now it's remained fairly level since the 1980s or so. So there hasn't been a big decrease in number of people per household, which obviously less people per household, you need more households. So here's a little more data with the average number of people per family in Canada from 2000 to 2019, and this is from Statistica. It's fairly accurate compared to what I had on that other graph, and it makes sense, right? It's not you're not going to turn around and say we have 10 people per household anymore. We have 2 to 3 people. So here's 2.9 people, and it's been very consistent. A little bit of a downtrend, but very consistent for the last 2 decades or however long this graph is, 19 years. Okay, so now let's look at the numbers I put together to kind of put some sense to this argument that there's a supply and demand issue. So here is again from Statistics Canada. It's been put together by tradingeconomics.com, and this, again, you can look the numbers up. They're pretty accurate. 38.01 million, 38 million or so Canadian population in 2020. If you look back down to 2010, we had 34.5 million approximately. So it's gone up, 3.5 million in 10 years. Sorry, this is 2011, but it's a 10-year period here from 2011 to 2020. Our population in Canada has increased 3.5 million. It's actually 3.53 million. So I'm going to compare that number with the increase in housing completions in that same time period. So I downloaded the CSV file from Statistics Canada directly. This is my file. You can see here Canada mortgage and housing starts, and I go from Q1 2011 and I go all the way up to Q4. Sorry, get it over here, right here. Q4 2020. Same time period as the population growth graph I showed you. And we have it broken down into housing starts, housing under construction, and I'm using housing completions for a true number of all new homes that are available to live in that period. Total units completed in each quarter for that 10-year time period. And you can see it's around 50,000, 50,000 per quarter in Canada. Our total units in the last 10 years, up until Q4 of 2020, was 1.88 million units completed. So now to compare from 2011 to 2020, Canada's population with our increase in new housing units, we're 3.53 million people that increase in population, 353,000 per year. The same period we had 1.88 million new housing units completed. That puts us at 1.9 people per unit. So for every unit we increased, we had 1.9 people. We had an increase in our population of 1.9 people, where our average household is 2.9 people. So we have more than enough units to accommodate our increase in population. So I don't see how a supply and demand issue is the problem with our housing market. So I just wanted to rule it out, and I think that I can rule it out. Also, forget about the new housing or the housing completions. Look at all, and I'm sure you know somebody that has retrofitted their basement or made an accessory apartment in their house. There's so many more basements been rented and accessory apartments that have been rented in that time period due to income potential or multi-generational families or whatever the case may be. That also adds to the new unit availability, but I'm not going to include that because we don't need to. So two things, in my opinion, are going to happen this year with the housing market. It's going to go up or it's going to go down. I don't see it staying the same. Markets usually, they go up or down. They don't flatline, in my opinion. So first thing that could happen is the Bank of Canada, they stick to their interest rate hike agenda that they've talked about, which has been moved up. The timeline has continuously been moved up because of rising inflation, and their number one way to fight inflation is with increased interest rates. So they're going to stick to their goals. And actually, I've heard they're going to move them up. It was supposed to be in the spring sometime, mid-year, and now we might hear something by the end of January with a small increase. So they're going to, if they increase consistently throughout the year, we're going to see a cooling in the housing market and most likely declines in most prices. As long as they don't do it once or twice and then reverse like they did in 2018. As long as they stick to that, that will happen. Or they're not going to raise interest rates or not enough, like they might do 1 or 2 throughout the year, and house prices will continue as per the other predictions on here from Remax and Royal LePage, and we will have that 5 or 10% increase in house prices and real estate prices in general. So yeah, that's my opinion. I see it going one way or the other. There's benefits and drawbacks to both depending on who you are in the real estate market, but we're at this point in time where one or the other has to happen, in my opinion. I don't see us just living our lives and carrying on, and prices are just going to stabilize and stay the same. Something's got to give in either way. I don't know which is the best solution, but I just know that one of those two things is going to happen this year. So that's my opinion on the 2022 Canadian housing market. And by all means, yeah, if you have any comments or inputs, drop it in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Until next time.